welcome to episode 266 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Friends, I hope you consider sending in your voice messages to schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. Your recording will be included in the very next episode. Visit today's show notes for 24 prompts and instructions for submitting your voice messages to the show. Amanda Jones's upcoming book, That Librarian, will be available starting on August 27th, but you can pre-order your copy now. And if you use the indie bookseller Cavalier House Books in Amanda's hometown of Denham Springs, Louisiana, you will get a signed copy. I've included a link in the show notes. When you look at the cover of Amanda's book, you might recognize the Freedom Fighters shirt that she's wearing. She reached out to the designer, Christy, who then designed a line of That Librarian apparel, as well as That Librarian flair, such as a bag, sticker, and mug. I love that we can all be that librarian who advocates for our library and our students' access to books. You'll find a link to the online store in our show notes. Please know that 15% of the proceeds go to the Texas Library Association, as that is the home state of the designer. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is @LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And friends, it is worth mentioning that every once in a while, details do slip through the cracks, and if I have promised you a podcast sticker and I am remiss and you have not received one in quite some time, by all means, please reach out to me again and say, hey, I'd love to have a podcast sticker. Please know I am a team of one, which means every once in a while, I sometimes forget to respond to listeners, and I do apologize, but I'm doing the best I can. Be sure to listen to episode 224. I announce a sponsorship with Literati Book Fairs, and now is a chance to hear from one of Literati's team members, Michael. Michael Murata, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Amy.
You know, Michael, in your opinion, what do you feel sets Literati Book Fairs apart from, say, other book fair experiences?
Sure. I think what Literati does really well is we have a full focus on the books themselves. So you see with other book fair companies, they might have like little trinkets and knickknacks and things like that at their book fairs. We do have what we call our reading and writing center. So we do have pens, erasers, and journals and notebooks, and those still promote literacy, but what we really want to focus on is getting books into the hands of kids. So we do promote our books far and away more than we do any other product on our fair.
Sometimes I think as somebody who has had some tears at other book fairs where students have wanted and pleaded with their families to buy the stuffed animals. And, I think at one point there were some video games out on the counter. It was like, no. And, I think that I appreciate, especially not just as a librarian, but also as a parent, that when your child is given an opportunity to spend money on books and they are sort of distracted by all these things that are not books, it really does present a challenge. So I appreciate it. I feel like Literati is also thinking of the parents in the equation, saying, we're going to just help everybody out. What is the most unique problem that you've helped a librarian solve during their book fair experience?
So one does come to mind. We worked with a Title I school out in California, and this Title I school received some funds from their district that they had to spend right away. The problem with that was their book fair was still a couple months away. So what we were able to do for them is we were able to open their e-fair a little bit early, so they were able to log into their e-fair, buy some gift cards with those Title I funds, and then turn those gift cards into books for each student in their school. They were able to use those gift cards to make purchases for all those students at the book fair.
See, I wouldn't even ask that question. Like, that wouldn't even occur to me like, oh, here's a problem. Oh, maybe I should just find out if Literati can help out. That's fantastic. Michael Murata, thank you so much for joining us. I just feel better equipped to tell listeners about Literati Book Fair and especially from somebody like yourself who is behind the scenes and really has a good sense of what's going on day to day at Literati.
Absolutely, Amy. Thank you so much for having me. And we'll always be there for our customers, and we're always available for them.
Have a great day.
You too.
Friends, be sure to tune in to learn all about Literati and their very generous offer. Librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They're offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, grant writing, and my conversation with Keely Nudo. Keely Nudo, welcome to the podcast.
I am so happy to be here, Amy. Thank you so much for having me. It's a true honor to spend some time with you talking about grant writing, but also to be a part of something that's pretty special. I love what you do to support all of us out here. Some of us working on, in silos and on islands, and you've helped connect us. So thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here today.
Well, Keely, I am grateful because, first of all, friends, it is spring break for many of us around the United States, and Keely and I are both technically on our first day of vacation. And what are we doing? we're sitting down to have a conversation about work.
Right. That's what we do.
Truly dedicated. A very strange idea of what we do for fun. So, friends, Keely and I met last fall. I was invited to speak at the Oregon Association of School Librarians annual conference, and you were there, which is fantastic. I loved meeting everybody in Oregon. And we also had another chance to meet in Tampa just a couple weeks later.
Yeah, this is great. Now we're on the opposite sides of the United States from each other.
Well, and we have to time it well because there's 3 time zones between us as well. And, again, we are on vacation and you got back into school to record because, am I correct? This is where the Wi-Fi is best.
Correct. Yes.
Excellent. So my interviews typically begin with me asking my guests to describe their library and the students they support and the programming that you offer. But you're a district librarian. So would you tell us about your district, the buildings, and perhaps some geography that would be helpful for context?
Sure. So I am the district librarian, but I'll tell you in a second about the different hats that I wear as with that title. We're in a small district outside of Portland, Oregon. There's about 8,000 people in our community, and we're considered rural, but it's more of a small town feel just because of our close proximity to Portland. We are an hour to the beach, or for my friends on the East Coast, the shore, and an hour to the mountains. So we are in the sweet spot of where you want to be if you love the great outdoors in the Pacific Northwest. So we're in a beautiful location. My district's interesting. As a district librarian, we have 5 schools. So we have 2 primary schools, pre-K through 3. And then we have 1 upper elementary school, or maybe what you would call an intermediate elementary school with grades 4 through 6. And then we have a middle school, which for me is kind of an odd thing because when I grew up, grades 7 and 8 were a junior high. But our middle school has grades 7 and 8. And then we have a high school, 9 through 12. So 5 different buildings, about 2,000 students, give or take a few. And those hats that I was telling you about, I am the district librarian. So I oversee all 5 of those libraries. I'm responsible for all the district level duties like policy and procedures and everything that comes along with that, as well as the collection management for approximately 40,000 books between all those libraries.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, and then I put on my other hat. I usually wear my district librarian hat, usually at night. I am the teacher librarian for my district as well. So I teach all kids pre-K through 6 in 3 different elementary schools each week. I am one of the people who cover the preps for our teachers. So when they drop off their kids, they go and have their prep time. So I cover prep for all of the teachers in those 3 different buildings. Big job.
Are those libraries not being supervised when you're gone?
I am a one-man show. Yeah, so when I'm not there at the elementary schools, my libraries are closed. Lots of them get used for other things. Our counselor uses them for teaching lessons and things like that when I'm not here. I have a crazy schedule. I do have one educational assistant who works at the middle school, and she wears a few different hats there, but one of hers is to keep the library open for the kids to come in and check out books and bring them back. But there's not necessarily library programming happening in there. Pretty much just a checkout system for our students.
So forgive me, are your high school students on an honor system when it comes to checking out books or being in that space? I guess I'm going to ask because somebody else wants to know, and so I get to ask those questions. What is happening in your high school when you are not there?
Well, that's a good question. We don't currently have an educational assistant in our high school library, which for me is so sad because 2 summers ago, I completely renovated that space as I took on this position. And it's like Starbucks without the coffee. It's like flexible seating and an amazing teaching space with these whiteboards that flip up so they can collaborate. 2 brand new computer labs, new fiction, got rid of all the nonfiction. I have a little bit left. But, high schoolers don't look for, stuff on planets by opening a book anymore. They want to go out and Google it and everything else. So we have a brand new database system over there. It's amazing, and it's empty when it comes to a librarian, which is super sad to me. We're working really hard in my district to try to reinstate that position, but it's funding. There's just not enough funds to put somebody in that building when I'm off teaching, the kids in the other buildings. So I do get over there on our early release day each week. So I'm over there for a little bit of library maintenance, but I don't get to work with kids. I can help staff with their book room needs and things like that, but I just don't get to work with kids, which is unfortunate. We are luckier this year than we were last year. We have a building sub in the building, and when she's not assigned to cover a classroom, then she's in the library opening up the library. So I am excited to say that this year we are checking out some books, and there's a lot more supervision and more excitement about the library. And the kids are noticing it too, because when they see her in a classroom teaching, they're like, "Are you going to be in the library later?" So there's some energy around that. So I'm really hoping that this next school year we'll be able to put an educational assistant back into the high school.
Friends, when I was in Oregon attending this conference, I got to meet some representatives from the Oregon State Library System. Keely, could you give us an idea of some resources which I didn't realize? I think this is fantastic, but it's something that we can share with listeners linked in the show notes. Can you give us an idea of some resources which the Oregon State Library has made available to anybody?
Yes, so through the Oregon School Library Information System, so it's OSLIS is what we call it here in Oregon, we have awesome databases that us as Oregonians and school libraries and schools have access to, and they're fabulous. I've put them to use in all of our buildings, and all of our staff have access to them as well. But there's also a tool on OSLIS, if you go out there, that you can use for either elementary students or secondary students. And it's a research tool, and it teaches kids how to properly research, how to properly cite, where to find resources. And actually, our group from OSLIS was at AASL in Tampa as one of the presenters when we did the poster walks, and they were giving out lots of information, great posters on, how to research. They are a great resource that your listeners can reach out to because they're very happy to help all across the nation to get kids researching and to get them finding information, not the fake news, the real stuff.
Well, and Keely, I do appreciate you being candid about how far you are stretched in your particular district. I think all too often when listeners reach out to me, we need to recognize that we all have struggles, whether it's with staffing or funding or the resources that we want to have to best support our students. And, so I want today to focus on the funding component of it, because it sounds like you have come up with some rather fantastic solutions. When I was talking to somebody else who knows you, they said, oh my gosh, you absolutely must talk to Keely Nudo about her grant writing. And I was so like, oh, absolutely, because it's been a long time, friends, since we focused on anything related to writing grants. And friends, I'll include a link in the show notes because I went back and I realized that the last time we sort of really focused on grant writing was episode 49 with Amanda Jones. And we're talking about November of 2019, free money and how to stretch your budget. So I am very grateful to Keely for her joining me today on our first day of vacation. I appreciate that you are juggling many, many hats. The focus of today's conversation is grant writing. As a district librarian, are you writing grants on behalf of all 5 of your libraries, or grants which support individual libraries which you oversee? Because I feel like this would be like Sophie's Choice, trying to figure out which is your favorite child.
Right. Exactly. It so is. But like we talked about, I teach 1,000 kids a week in 3 different buildings and 7 different grade levels. So I don't have a lot of time. So time is really an issue. So when I'm writing grants, one of the most important thing is figuring out what matches which school and how do I get the biggest benefit for the amount of time that I'm putting into it. So, books are expensive. I think that people, on the outside do not realize how much a library-bound book costs. When you're looking at grants and you're trying to figure out, are you going to write it for the district? Or are you going to write it for a school? And you're trying to measure, again, that effort for what you're going to get back from it. You really have to be careful about what you're choosing as your funder. So with that said, though, all of my schools are very different. So, we have one school that's out on kind of the edge of town. We kind of like our country school, you might want to call it. And then we have another, these are the primary schools. And we have one that's more in town and feels like not a rural school. One school qualifies for Title I, one doesn't. So you also have to make sure that when you're applying for your grants, that your schools qualify. So sometimes when you're looking at those funders, your entire district may not qualify, but maybe one of your schools will. There's funders who find a small rural school, like my country school, very attractive. They want to be supporting those small libraries that oftentimes get left behind, and that school does get left behind a lot. So I feel like it's easier to write them individually for the schools than it is to write them for the district. But I'm also going to say the time that it takes to do a big grant for an entire district is huge, because instead of doing the data analysis that I need to do to write a really solid grant for one school, I have to do that for the entire district. That takes a lot of time and there's and a lot of energy and a lot of knowledge. And I'm in my 3 elementary schools every day, all week long. But I'm not in my middle school very often because I have an excellent educational assistant who's keeping things going there. So I haven't developed an expertise about the middle school. I have more knowledge about the high school because I completely renovated it, but I still don't know what the needs of those kids are and that staff. Really, right now, my focus has been on writing it for the individual schools. I think that as I am in my position longer, I'll be able to have more knowledge and I can go for the big fish. But right now, I'm focusing on individual schools. Because the other thing too is that a lot of the grants that I'm focusing on are kind of those, $1,000 to $2,500. That's not a lot of books. That's about 30 to 35 books on the small end, and it's maybe 70 books on the top end. And so when you're looking at funding, it's hard for me to put like two of my schools together because the impact isn't as great. If you're trying to overhaul an entire nonfiction section, that's not going to do it. You're going to need multiple grants if you use multiple schools because you're not going to have that many books to pass around. So it's really putting the puzzle pieces together to just see what fits and what meshes and what makes the most sense.
True. Because you can't necessarily count on receiving the grants you apply for, what are you doing in the meantime to keep programs and your plans for these libraries moving forward?
I'm a district librarian with no district funding. So it's one of those interesting, again, putting the puzzle pieces together, right, to see what you can come up with. So my buildings, they find funds to support the library, but, different leadership, different priorities, different budget years. You never can really count on, what's going to be stable to fund your libraries. And honestly, what I get from my buildings pretty much covers what it takes to replace lost and damaged books, is what it does. A perfect example is we had a leak at Christmas break in the high school in the book room through the ceiling. No one told me because they thought it was okay because it was just on the floor. It didn't actually get into the bookshelves. And so, everyone was like, well, we got it all cleaned up and it was all fine. But they didn't realize that, when water comes through the roof and splashes on the floor, it goes up onto the bookshelves. So when I went to go get some books for some language arts teachers to use, I pulled them out in the shelves full of black mold. So because I didn't do that until just a few weeks ago. In that small instance, we didn't have a budget for the high school for books because we don't have someone to run the library. So we really haven't budgeted money at the high school for new books. But I did have a small fund that I could use to, a kid comes in and wants a book and I could order that book, get it on the shelf. That's completely gone to replace those moldy books. So it's one of those situations where you have to have other things in place to make sure that you can survive the moldy book syndrome. The biggest thing for me in my elementary schools is book fairs. It's huge. Book fairs are what put new books on our shelves. In the last 2 years since I've had this position, we have put about $35,000 worth of new books onto the shelves in my 3 schools, which is hundreds of books for our kids. And book fairs are great. Literati is fantastic with their Follett system, and, Scholastic super, they're great too. But the problem is that, to get the most money from your book fairs, you have to order from them. So you have to order from Follett, you have to order through Scholastic. It limits where you can buy your books from. And then you don't get as much if you take the cash, right? So grant writing is better because if you can get a grant, then you can go buy your books from wherever you want to go buy your books. That's, one of the things that makes grant writing worth the time and the energy is because then you can really choose what you want to do. But book fairs are my lifeline in my libraries. Also, parent organizations. The parent organizations at the high school level, we have a booster club. But the parent organizations, if you show them the library benefits all children in the building, that you are, Melissa Stewart has a great quote, and she talks about how the library is the heart of the building and the teacher librarian is the heartbeat. I mean, if you are the person who makes that heartbeat in the building, then the parent organization is going to be more willing to support you with your initiatives that you want to do in the building, particularly if your initiatives are supporting literacy building-wide. With that, you also need to make sure that you're supporting your parent organization. So when they're having their bingo night and they're having all those different things, you need to be there for them. And you need to spread the word on your social media about their fundraising efforts and what they're doing, because they do benefit every kid in our building. So creating great relationships with the parent organizations, making sure that you say thank you to them, that's super important. Those parent organizations will step up when you need them to. But also building relationships in your community. One of the very first things I did when I got this position was went and met with our public library and said, hey, I'm the new librarian in the district. And they were so excited because they'd never talked to the district librarian before. So there had never been that relationship. And so immediately, I'm just telling you, they are the best weeding pals in the entire world. They will come and help you weed. They are amazing people. I love them. But also, because of that relationship, I've been really fortunate. I've been a beneficiary of one of their grants. They got a grant, and their grant was to do something in the community. And we got amazing books about diversity and everything else from them because they chose us because of that relationship. They always give me new copies of those hot new releases that are coming out. I got Dog Man on the doorstep when it comes out. The other thing, too, is that in Oregon, we have a competition called Oregon Battle of the Books, and they've supplemented copies for us. They always make sure they have lots of copies in their library for our kids so that if I run out in the library, our kids can go down the street and get it from them. But they also make sure that I have enough copies in my libraries for my kids. And finally, the other thing that keeps me going is social media. You got to tell everybody what you're doing. Everybody needs to know that what you're doing in the library is making a difference. And, you're contributing to the building's, overall literacy, but you're also, you are impacting student achievement. You're collaborating with teachers. There's so many things that we do. A lot of people think that we sit and check out books every day and just put books back on the shelf. That is a very small part of what we do in our libraries. And until we tell people, they don't know that. And so it's important for us to share everything that we're doing. And for me, I put all onto social media. I have newsletters at all of my schools. I have a district website. I put all of those things on there so that everything's transparent. Everybody knows what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And so when I need help, I just ask. I put a note out on social media. I've got volunteers in there the next morning to help me get it done. I put my Amazon wish list link on there. The next thing I know, I've got these things for these little mini maker spaces in my libraries. People are amazing. They want our kids to have a great experience when they're at school. So if you are a good partner and they can trust you with what you're doing and their generosity, they're going to give. So social media is a huge tool. And again, you have to make sure you tell people thank you. You need to recognize people when they step up and they help out. You need to make sure that a thank you is, there's some people who like to be thanked, quietly, and there's other people who like to be thanked publicly, and you need to make sure you know your audience and make sure you say your thank yous.
The one time I got a grant in the job I currently have, and I made sure that in addition to standing in front of that check, they bring you sort of a check as well, because this was a local organization, and they wanted a picture with a check. And I said, well, we need my principal, because my principal also needs to be in this picture. So you better believe that there was some choreography here when it comes to making sure that whatever we shared out on social media also included our school leadership, to not only thank the organization, but also make sure that this is something that was supported by the school leadership when I went forth and wrote this grant. Keely, your name came up when I was talking to somebody about some of the episodes I was hoping to record in 2024. Your name came up. When you are reflecting back on the grants which you have successfully obtained, can you think of what you did that really tipped the odds in your favor in terms of getting your grants approved and fulfilled?
A compelling and data-rich story, 100%. You need to know your stuff, and you need to be really good at sharing it. You need to be passionate about what you do. I just applied for a grant recently that literally one of the boxes that you fill in on the Google form said, provide a compelling story. You have to have a compelling story. What is going to make your grant stand out over somebody else's? I mean, because, as librarians, we're all asking for books, right? from a funder who's giving books. Like, why should I give books and someone else not give books? So you have to have that compelling, but it also has to be data rich. Like, you need to know your stuff. You need to be able to tell why you need it, how you're going to measure it, all of those things. You have to have all the components in place. But you also, I feel like you're more successful writing grants if you really find the perfect fit. Kind of earlier when we were talking about my different schools. One of my schools is not going to work for a certain funder, but the other school is going to be perfect and it's going to be that fit. When I, recently when I wrote a grant, I was researching and all of these grants that they were doing were for these rural communities. And, it was a bigger grant. It was a nationwide grant. But everything that they chose was rural. So I focused it on my rural school, my country school that's smaller. Lots of funders want a bigger bang. They want more kids. They want to impact the most kids that they possibly can. But this isn't what that funder looks for. That funder looks for a school where it is overlooked. It doesn't get the things that other schools in the district or in the surrounding communities get. It's looking for that. And so you got to find that perfect fit. But also, I feel like having an advocate kind of goes back to the whole social media talk that I was, saying earlier. You have to leverage those relationships of the people who know what you're doing. I mean, if people know the positive impact that you're going to have, if you have an advocate, you have someone perhaps maybe even on the board of the funding foundation, they're all of a sudden going and they're saying to the selection committee, hey, there's this person in such and such place, and they are doing amazing things with the money that they're getting. All of a sudden, your grant comes to the top of the stack instead of the bottom of the stack. So again, it's that communication and making sure that your story is being told everywhere so that you have advocates out there, and just really that compelling data-rich story, the perfect fit, and then having that advocate. That's like the secret weapon right there, is having an advocate.
So, friends, I'm pretty sure I've shared this story before, but when I was first hired at my high school, I learned that on the foundation, our district has a foundation which likes to support teacher initiatives. And I was brand new. I'd only been there for a couple weeks. And I found out that on the foundation, the board of directors for this foundation, which honors these grants for these educators, was a retired school librarian from the district I just left. We were colleagues. We had worked together. We knew each other. And I reached out and I said, it's me. I like, all of a sudden I had this instant connection with somebody that I'd worked with about 6 years prior. And we were able to, speak library. And so when you know that you're talking to another librarian, and especially a school librarian, all of a sudden you start throwing around this common terminology. And thankfully, our circulation software makes it very easy to pull up data when it comes to our collections and the average age of our collections, and finding out that the really compelling, like you mentioned, that the data that we can offer to boost whatever requests we are making, even that more compelling for people who are considering our grants that we're writing.
For sure, yeah.
I'm curious, Keely, because anybody who's ever written a grant knows that there is a lapse in time. You you have all of this energy and you get excited about applying for a grant with the understanding that a decision won't be made for months later. Sometimes many months later, so much so that you even sort of forget that you've written the grant until you find out you received it. Friends, an example I will use is the GLSEN Rainbow Library, which is one I received this week. Completely forgot about submitting that back in the fall. So back in the fall, I saw something on GLSEN about their rainbow libraries. I filled out the grant application, and the box magically appeared this past week.
And there's good stuff in that box.
Absolutely. Have you received a GLSEN Rainbow Library? 2? Friends, we'll put a link in the show notes. You should definitely, if you haven't put in a request for a GLSEN Rainbow Library, I strongly encourage. It is like Christmas come on some random day in the middle of March. But I'm so excited because when I get back from our break, it's the first thing I'm going to be working on.
And it's also awesome too, Amy, just as the longer you have your library, you'll find they have amazing professional development that they will keep offering you forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And even if you don't go, they keep asking you to come, and it's awesome.
Well, and forgive me, but as somebody who has to document the professional development that I attend, I don't see why I wouldn't include that in my end-of-year portfolio on the things I did to grow as a professional that didn't cost me any money. And when we're both looking at zero budget, you have to appreciate when somebody offers you free training. In my limited experience of writing grants, I'll admit that when I see an organization that has grants available that I can apply for, I sort of stalk that organization. And I think about when I wrote a grant and I unfortunately didn't get it, but it was very distracting for me because after having submitted that grant, I just, you sort of repeatedly revisit their website to find out when they're going to be releasing their decisions and who's going to be receiving those grants. You know, it's very distracting, but I'm guessing that you've come to do that yourself.
Oh, for sure. And, you know, and also kind of, again, talking about that time lapse, you know, of, you know, oh my gosh, I forgot I even did that. I think the biggest thing is, and we're all stalkers. Let's just be honest. We all are. Particularly if we're waiting for a grant, because we just really, really, really want that grant to happen, right? You have to have a time frame for two different things. You have to keep track of what you're applying for. Because one thing is that sometimes I'll just be writing grants like a crazy fool, and because I'm just like, oh, there's money here and there's money here, and all of my projects match all of these different grants, and I'm so excited. But if you get on a lucky streak and you all of a sudden get all of those grants, like you said, lots of times that funding comes later, and then you are in, you know, a really complicated situation because lots of times those funds come in when your district is cutting off spending and your books have to, be received in the building by a certain amount of time because the check was written to the school and then you have to go through the school purchasing, situation. So you really have to keep an accurate timeline on what you've applied for and when those funds are going to come, not only for the spending part of it, but also for the reporting part of it. Like, how are you going to make sure that you can get all of your reporting done? Reporting is one of the most important things in the success of being able to qualify for other grants, because the word gets out if you're not a good reporter and you don't tell them how you're spending their money. But also, if you want a grant from them again, you need to make sure that you are giving them an excellent report as to how you have spent that money. And so your reporting needs to be quality. It has to have, I would believe that you send them pictures of kids with books and all of a sudden they're like, yes. That's the clincher. They want to see the joy in those kids with those books in their hands. That's what they want to see. They want to see those teachers in a PD where you are showing them how to align those books to their curriculum. They want to see it. They want to see it. They want to hear it. A video. Have a 6-year-old talk about how they love to use the Dewey Decimal System to find their new nonfiction. That's going to seal the deal. So reporting is such a critical thing. And so in that whole time lapse and what are you going to do? You have to have that time frame because you have to be ready to execute that grant and get those funds spent, get what you need to done, what you say you're going to get done, and have that reporting done in the time that they need that reporting back to them, because their funds come from maybe a national organization or maybe a private funder who has a certain tax year for themselves. So they're held accountable for reporting as well. So a timeline is crucial. And also I feel like a timeline, I keep two of them. I also feel like a timeline for applications as well, because you don't want to get yourself overextended. It takes time to write a quality grant, and you don't want to get yourself overextended to the point where you cannot write quality.
I imagine that there is some, forgive me, redundancy in some of these grants, where when you compile the information for your school, you sort of have a file which you can readily tap the next time that information is called upon. It sounds like anybody who has to juggle as many schools and responsibilities as you have, that you've got a system like many school librarians do of keeping really vital, important information readily accessible. I'm listening to you talk about this accountability piece when we do receive a grant, and it reminds me, I'm getting flashbacks of my mother making sure that I write that thank you note to my aunt when I got my birthday present. But it's important. I mean, for the same reason. I mean, you really have to remember that thank you, that acknowledgement of this gift is also important, because it serves a purpose for not just you as the recipient, but for them as the donors.
It's super important.
Do you recommend bothering with long shots, or do you exclusively focus on grants which you have a reasonably good chance of getting?
Well, I have to say, if you have the time, go for it. Because just like you were just saying, the thing is that if you don't apply for it, you can't get it, right? I mean, it's one of those things. And what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to tell you no. But the thing is that different applications, they help you develop your story and develop that collateral or those attachments that you need to have. And so the more applications you fill out, the more you develop your craft of grant writing. And one of the things that I find is that the more diverse grants that you tackle, you start getting little pieces of like, oh, I need to add that to my next grant. That it doesn't ask for it, but that's awesome. Like, I need to add that into my grant. All of these things that you experience every time you fill one out. And grant writing is very, very different. Depending on the funder, it's a Google form. It's pretty simple and straightforward, and might even have limits as to how many words you can put in that little box, to something else where it can be a 14, 15 page, proposal that you're writing, and they have all of these components they want you to address as well as then attach. And also maybe that your grant might even have to have some letters of recommendation. You have to factor those things in too, because if other people have to write those letters of recommendation, you got to find time for that as well. I think that the more you write, the better you get. The long shots, they give you ideas for becoming a better grant writer for sure. And also, if you start picking out all these little different things from all these other different grants, you might find that one thing that tips your grant writing into your favor.
It sounds like you've never been penalized for adding more. It sounds like the problem is when you don't provide enough information, enough documentation. But if you provide more than the documentation that is required, it certainly has never penalized you in that application process.
Except for those new ones that are starting to do those Google Docs with word limits. And then you have to craft what you say. I mean, you have to, you need to really, lots of times with those types of grants, I'll take it and write it in a Google Doc, and I'll go through and I'll answer the question with how I want to say it, how I want to answer it. And then I will go through and go, okay, I've got 150 words. What am I going to take out of here? And that is hard work, because you have to try to figure out what is the most important, what is going to make you stand out, what's going to be that compelling story but still include the data. That is hard. Is some of these new grants, they don't want too much information. But in other situations, they love all of the things that you can share with them. And you'll find it, and you'll figure that out as you're writing the grants, and as you go to what, lots of times they'll give you like a template or something like that you can follow.
I'm really glad I asked. I will be honest, I'll share one experience I had with a grant, and it was disappointing because we didn't get it. But the harder thing about this particular grant is it required a video from my students. And I got to be honest, it would have been a wonderful thing, and I really got my hopes up about it. But because it required a video statement from my students, and they were glad to provide it. This particular grant, the deadline is in April. And of course, I had graduating students who were leaving, and they're like, did we get the grant? Did we get the grant? And they were, I found out that we didn't at the end of June. And it was very frustrating for me, because it's one thing if I write a grant and nobody knows that we did get the grant. It's another thing altogether that if it involves other people and you don't get the grant, that now you have to share that disappointment. And I think that that's something that I can't let it prevent me from moving forward, but I have to recognize that's a reality.
That's so true. So true. And I've had grants in the same, I even have one this year that, I keep telling the kids about because they really want these certain books. And I'm like, I've written a grant, you guys, we got to hang in there. We got to keep waiting. I'm waiting for that no, or, if we get a yes, it's going to be great. But if it's a no, they're going to be so disappointed. But at the same time, it's a good life lesson for them too, though, that, you try hard and you don't always get the reward that you're hoping for, but you got to try again.
Absolutely. Have you ever repeatedly applied for a grant that has eluded you?
I have, not within my library yet. I haven't run into one of those yet. I also work with a nonprofit that I write grants for. I got rejected, but it was a big grant. It was a really big grant, and it was such a meaningful grant for the organization that I just kept trying and trying and trying. Eventually we got the grant, and it was game-changing for our organization. The disappointment, the effort that it took, it was all worth it. But you learn so much in the process if you have to apply multiple times for the same grant. Most funders will tell you what you are missing if you reach out to them. They won't tell you if they just reject you and you go, okay, thanks, and you move along. But if you reach out to them, most funders will say, hey, this part needs to be stronger. Or, this didn't quite fit with this, like your need right here didn't fit with our mission. Is there a way to manipulate it or change it? With our organization, it was a different population of kids, at-risk kids that we were working with. I needed to change the population. I changed the population. We eventually got to where we needed to get to. I mean, you learn a lot. If you're getting rejections, many funders will put the grants that they do fund onto their websites. So you can go and, like we were talking about earlier, we're all stalkers. We can go back and you can go back and stalk that grant that won. Go research that school, go research that, that organization, and you'll learn a lot about them. And then you'll know what to say about your organization or about, your school. I haven't gotten real big with grants yet, like the big grants, like you're talking about going for the big stuff, but I'm getting there. And so I know that there will be rejections, and I know that there will be things that I really want for our kids. And it's going to be worth doing it multiple times.
Sure. I know most applications will indicate if you have already won this grant before, not to apply. But have you, in your experience, ever managed to receive a grant from the same organization more than once?
I have. And I love this organization because of that. The Oregon Education Association has a Center for Great Public Schools, and they have a grant called Promising Practices. And they are all about innovation and things that are new things. They want new stuff. I've been turned down a couple of times, but I also have received multiple grants when I was in the classroom, and then now as a librarian. And then even when COVID hit and I had a grant from them, and I wasn't able to pull off that grant, they were so great to work with about giving the money back to them. And then they funded my project, a new project the following year. It's a great organization to work with. If any of your listeners are from Oregon, you should check it out. It's, through the Oregon Education Association, and you can find it on their website. They've been super supportive of my ideas and my initiatives. That doesn't happen if you don't develop those relationships.
We have listeners tuning in right now who would like to experience some of the same types of success that you've had in grant writing. Could you possibly offer us a list of thou shalt not? What are some things you absolutely would advise against doing for those of us perhaps who don't have as much experience as you have in writing grants?
2 things. Don't go big right out of the gate, and don't overextend yourself. In regards to, don't go too big. Don't go for the big fish on your first grant writing experience, because it's overwhelming. It takes time to do it well. Play in the little pond for a little while before you go for the big fish. You're going to have more success doing the small, local. I don't want to say that they're easy, because I don't think any of them are easy, but you're going to have more success and you're going to build more confidence telling your story if you start small. The more applications you do, like we said, you get better at them. But once you catch that excitement of getting that first grant funded and you're spending someone else's money buying those books, oh man, there's nothing like it. So as soon as you can get that first little win, it's going to fire you up to do more and expand what you're doing. A $500 grant is awesome. It's free money. It's money you didn't have at the beginning of the day. Start small and then build big. You don't want to go big when you first start. I think you'll get so intimidated by some of the big ones and what they're asking you for. Because they ask for tax forms, and if you're new to it, you might not even know the people in your district who could provide you that information. So it's overwhelming. This is advice I should have given myself this year: is to not overextend yourself. Last year was my first year as the district librarian. I had a lot of things that I needed to do. Coming out of COVID, we didn't have anybody in the libraries. We had a huge mess. I wrote some grants and I got several grants last year, so I was pretty excited about that. This year, I really tried to change, some of the direction I was going in my library with better instruction and some of those other things, because I got the libraries kind of to where I like them and they're working and they're functioning well. So, I started diving into some other things for me as a professional to give to my kids, and I overextended myself. And I started getting myself right up next to grant deadlines. And as I'm trying to write those grants, my quality of my grants this year are not as good as the quality of the grants that I wrote last year. And, in regards to the busy, I'm just as busy this year as I was last year. Different kind of busy. But the thing is that I overextended myself and I didn't give myself enough time to do my due diligence and be intentional in my grant writing. So I'm not thinking that this year is going to be as fruitful as last year was. And it's my own fault because I overextended myself, and I don't think that the quality of it is as good as what it was last year. And also I branched out. I'm going some different directions and choosing some national grants this year. And, so when I did that, though, I needed to be better at what I was doing. And so and I've learned my lesson. I haven't gotten any no's yet, but I'm still waiting. I'm in that time lapse. I'm not overly confident that I'm going to get them either, because, as I reflect, if I go back through my application and I'm looking at them going, man, I left out this. Man, I should have done that. As well as starting out small. Don't try to write 10 of them your first year.
Keely Nudo, you are incredible. You've provided us with a fantastic infographic. I love a great infographic, and it encapsulates a great deal of what we've already discussed in this conversation. Listeners would love to know, what advice would you give to those who are interested in bettering their chances of success when it comes to writing our grants moving forward?
Well, I think you need to start local and work your connections. When I'm talking about local, I'm talking something as simple as the parent-teacher organization with a special spending request. Maybe you want to have a reading challenge over the summer and you need to buy some prizes and you need advertising for it or whatever. Reach out to your parent-teacher organization. They have special spending requests. A lot of district foundations. Amy was talking about her district has a foundation. Unfortunately, mine doesn't because we're very tiny. But, like Portland Public has a great foundation. Some foundations just support teachers with different initiatives that they want to do in their classrooms. So sometimes they have like a focus initiative. So like diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's where you can say, hey, I want to make sure that my library collection is diverse. So I'm going to reach out to them for a little bit of money to try to help, make my collection a little more diverse. You can make those connections to the library very easily. Local businesses love to help out, particularly if you have a local business that a parent works at. Things like insurance companies and real estate agents. They love to sponsor your OBOB books. You put a sign in the library that says, these books were brought to you, compliments of whoever. That's just a simple letter writing. Or it could actually even be an ask in a Starbucks line. I mean, it could be really simple, but it can make a huge impact. So local is huge. Also look for local foundations and organizations like in your county, particularly if you have a rural library. Lots of times there's funding that comes, nationally, and they're looking for placing it in different places. So, look in your county. And then again, work with your public library. If you have a public library nearby, they're a great asset to connecting you to grants that you can even partner with them. I really want to just finish this with knowing your story is the most critical thing. So you have to know your school and your district. And that means you need to know what's your strategic planning that's coming out of the district office. What are those initiatives that they want you to focus on? Is your mission this year the social and emotional health of kids after COVID? Then you need to be looking, how are you going to tie your grant to the collection to that initiative? Is it diversity and equity and inclusion? Is it technology? What are the hot topics that your district is looking for in their strategic plan? But also, how does that connect with your building, vision, and your mission? And how does your vision and mission tie to the vision and mission of the funder? Because that's critical. If you don't have that mix, then you're not gonna have that fit. And you need to know your data. What are your test scores? What are your demographics? Look at the census data. Don't just look at that school report card. Go out and really find, what are the demographics of your community? Free and reduced lunch isn't the only thing that talks to you about trauma or poverty or generational abuse and incarceration. I mean, all of those different things, you need to know those because, again, that helps you tell that story. And you also need to know the difference between your wants and your needs, right? Because we all want books. That's what we want. But, maybe your need is that you need animal books for second graders and biographies for fifth graders. You need to be able to tie your grant to what you specifically need. Maybe, there's a grant out there that only funds graphic novels. Well, look at your graphic novel data. Can you tie your need to that graphic novel grant? And then also you need to know your people. Who's going to collaborate with you on this grant? Is it going to be your teachers? Is it going to be your administrator? Is it going to be someone from the district office? Who's going to help you in this process to make sure that you are benefiting stronger classroom library connections? Because you need to know that you are an important asset to your building. Know your curriculum. You have to know your curriculum. What are teachers using in their classrooms? Because you need to connect to that. And you also need to fill in the gaps, because lots of times they have a new curriculum and they have a big gap. Like all of a sudden they're supposed to teach world, this world environment, whatever. You don't even know what it means. Look it up and figure it out and find the books to match it. You're going to build relationships with teachers. You're going to show your administrators that you are interested in student achievement. And you're also going to help those kids fill that gap that classroom can't do because they don't have those books in their classroom library. So it's super important that you know your curriculum, and you got to be passionate about what you do. That's what gets Amy and I on a Monday morning of spring break on a podcast, because we're passionate about what we do. We do it for the kids. We do it because we know it makes a difference.
Keely Nudo, I can't think of a better way to kick off our spring break than to share this conversation. I am so grateful that you were here to share with our listening audience all of your expertise. Would you let listeners know how we can get in touch with you if listeners would like to learn more?
Sure. Probably email would probably be the best to connect with me. So my email is KNUDO at Scappoose, and I will spell that for you, at CAPPOOSE.K12.OR.US. And also, if you go, because I've even Googled myself, because, it's important to Google yourself because you just don't know what people are saying about you out there. So, it's always good to give yourself a Google check every once in a while. And if you Google the Scappoose Librarian, You'll find my website for my district. There's lots of contact information on there. There's even a phone number if you want to give me a call.
I am so grateful for the time we were able to spend together. Keely, I am hoping very much that you and I cross paths again in the future. Have a fantastic spring break.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's been a pleasure, and I am such a huge fan, and I can't wait to share this podcast with friends. And it's been super fun because now people are listening to me, so I can get them to listen to all your podcasts. So this is fantastic. This is a win-win.
Happy spring, Keely.
Happy spring break. Happy spring to you.
Friends, you want to make sure to check out the 2 terrific resources in today's show notes, Keely's infographic and a link to the K-12 information literacy website designed for upper elementary and secondary students. It teaches the research process and the central K-12 access point for Oregon statewide databases and provides a citation generator in MLA and APA formats. This website is a project of the Oregon Association of School Librarians in partnership with the State Library of Oregon. Anyone can use this resource. The databases are for Oregonians only. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. A couple friendly reminders, friends. Use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more, and librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. I hope you will consider sending in your voice message and have your say on the very next podcast episode. Visit the link in today's show notes. The topic of our next episode will be creating a reading culture and my conversation with Dr. Margaret Murga. I hope you will tune in.